The neuromuscular junctions are places on muscle fibers where a motor neuron coming from your brain comes almost into contact with the muscle fiber. And that's this picture that you see here. The blue structure is a neuron, and we can actually imagine that this neuron is in the brain and coming down and out the spinal cord to connect with these muscle fibers. These are a bunch of muscle fibers that are present in, I don't know, calf muscle or something like that. And as this neuron follows the pathways through the epimysium, it branches out into all of these little dead ends that you see over here. Each little dead end is a neuromuscular junction. It's important to realize that there can be hundreds of neuromuscular junctions in one muscle. I mean, right here, all you see is a fasciculi, and there's what, 6? Yeah. So also from this picture, there are muscle fibers that have more than one muscular junction. The muscle and the neuron here, they don't touch. They are separated by a very small space that's called a synapse. And in order for the muscle to contract, there's a certain sequence of events that have to take place here at the neuromuscular junction and excite the muscle. What this means is that the neuron will have an action potential. Let's draw that. Sorry. The neuron will have an action potential bringing information from the brain to the muscle, and that the neuron will pass that action potential to a muscle, exciting it. I can't stress enough how this word excitation now means something very specific to you. And it even has a location at these neuromuscular junctions in your body. What happens is that students go to take the quiz and there'll be questions about excitation, and some students are like, did we even talk about that? Excitation, what is this term? That's not familiar. And it's not familiar because it has such a different meaning in the context of our class. So don't be fooled, right? Make sure that you have a very clear meaning of excitation, that it is the passing of an electrical action potential. It is the passing of a change in voltage, right? Because voltage is how we measure electricity. Since the neuron does not touch the muscle fiber, and since electricity, like an action potential, it can't travel through an open space safely. It can, that's called lightning. But since it can't do that, there are molecules that are going to flow from the neuron to the muscle fiber. And it's these molecules that will carry the message of excitation. These molecules, basically, they span the synapse and they're like, hey, excite. Molecules that are capable of traveling across a synapse between neurons and muscles are called neurotransmitters. I encourage you to use this abbreviation NXT in your notes to stand for neurotransmitters. We will see them again when we talk about neuron to neuron communication. Here, at the neuromuscular junction, there is only one neurotransmitter, and its name is acetylcholine. I should probably write that for you. And it is abbreviated ACH, and that is not a typo. The A and the C are capitalized, and the H is lowercase. Although every time you type it into Word, it will try to autocorrect that. So we've zoomed in on the muscle fiber where it comes into very close contact but does not touch a neuron. This big yellow thing coming down from the top of the picture is the tip or the dead end of that motor neuron, like the cul-de-sac. We call it a motor neuron because it is carrying information to a muscle out of the brain, and that's going to cause motion, that information. So this is a motor neuron. It's not a sensory neuron that is taking in information and sending it to the brain. This cul-de-sac of this neuron is specifically called the axon terminal. So therefore, this structure, the big yellow structure, is the axon terminal of a motor neuron. And it is shoved full of vesicles that are full of ACH, or acetylcholine. There are also these voltage-gated channels on the axon terminal, and these channels can only allow calcium to go through them, and calcium is always more abundant on the outside of a cell than on the inside. And so calcium, if these channels are open, calcium will flow into the cell. But to open these channels, we need an action potential, which means that they need a change in voltage. So an action potential is like a moving change in voltage that travels from the brain to the end of a neuron so that that neuron can excite the muscle across the synapse. And these voltage-gated channels are here because when they open up, the only ion that's capable of moving into them is calcium. Down here on the bottom of the muscle fiber, separated from the axon terminal by the space called the synapse, is the motor end plate. The motor end plate, it's just the area on the sarcolemma, or the muscle fiber's cell membrane, and it has these wavy lines here, which aren't present in other areas on the sarcolemma. And these are called junctional folds. Of course, as with any wavy border, these folds increase the surface area of the sarcolemma at this motor end plate. And increasing the surface area, it allows for faster transmission of the action potential from the neuron to the muscle fiber. Shoved into the sarcolemma in all of these places are little protein receptors that are also channels. So these are ligand gated, which meaning that they have a lock that a key has to be inserted into. And these are also sodium and potassium channels. Recall from a previous chapter that ligand-gated channels, they open up when a physical molecule makes a connection with them. So ligand, the ligand that opens up these channels, or the key that opens up these doors, is ACH. If you can get ACH to connect here, then you can open up these channels. So ACH, it doesn't actually enter into a muscle fiber. It doesn't go through the channel. It just connects with this receptor and it opens up the channel. When the channel opens up, two events happen. Sodium diffuses into the muscle fiber because sodium is always in more concentration outside of a cell than it is inside of a cell. And then once that's done, potassium starts flowing out of a muscle fiber because potassium is always in greater concentration inside a cell than it is outside of cell. This, you know what, the movement here, it's kind of like people in an elevator, right? Like everybody has to get off before the other people can get on. So like for sodium, it has to get into the cell before potassium starts to move out of the cell. Okay, so let's make some notes that are going to be really useful for you for the rest of this class because we'll always talk about it. As sodium diffuses in, and we'll put sodium goes in, the cell becomes more positive, and this is called depolarization. Right? The cell becomes more positive because it collects positive cations. Okay, all right. Now, as potassium goes out, because that's the way that it moves, the cell becomes less positive. You could also say more negative, but we'll find out in a future chapter why we always refer to the positive. This is called repolarization, right? Because if you lose positive charges, if they move out, then you will become more negative. So this little note here, we will see over and over and over again, right? So make sure you have that jotted down on like an index card and next to you when we have class. If we have class, you might be in the online section. Write it down.